Hey, I'm Cheryl Fidelman, the Conscious Codependence Coach, and in this video I'm going to share my ideas on the difference between a codependent empath and an empathetic empath, or codependent empathy and empathetic empathy. How to tell the difference if we're taking on somebody else's energy, or if energy that we're feeling is actually our own energy. Are we over there with another person thinking that we think we know what they feel and we're calling that empathy? Or are we feeling something triggered by them thinking that our trigger is them, right? So there's so many different things and ways of experiencing human connection that we call empathy. And I think that there's just some things we need to tease apart as to what kind of empathetic experience is us not knowing actually what is ours and what is theirs. And if we think we're feeling something from another person, do we then have a job to do or some responsibility to do to handle what we think is going on for another person? How much agency do we have as far as staying in our own lane, in our own experience, and holding on to our energy and mixing it or not mixing it or choosing how much energy with other people we're going to mix? Please like or subscribe to my channel. Keep the comments coming. And okay, here we go. From the point of view of my work, Conscious Codependence Recovery, empathy is when we really listen to another person's experience and we understand what they're saying to the best of our ability. And we may feel some compassion. We may feel our heart opening. We may feel some level of wanting them to feel better, or they're feeling great, and so we simultaneously kind of feel great and we want to feel the feeling with them. We want to feel great together. So something about another person's experience is interesting to us. We want to serve it in some way. We feel like their energy is filling our body as well, and so it becomes some sort of a shared experience. It doesn't necessarily always mean we can relate to the experience. It doesn't necessarily mean we agree, right? Like the way they walked through that experience is the same way we would walk through it. So I want to add that to empathy, is we can actually have empathy with a situation that we might think we would never find ourselves in, or we may never deal with it the way that they dealt with it, and we may not have the same logic that they have. So we can have empathy for another person, even though what they're experiencing seems so not congruent with something we have or would experience. Sometimes with empathy, there also feels like a melding, right? There feels like a connection. It feels like, oh wow, maybe we're like sharing the same human existence or same human moment, or we're existing in a similar frequency right now. Here's where I think empathy starts to cross over into codependent empathy. When we start to have feelings, like if I start to have feelings in relation to you, and I think the feelings I'm having are your feelings. Like, oh, I'm feeling your feelings. Oftentimes in our codependence, we go, I'm having a feeling, it's not me, it's the other person. There's oftentimes a beauty to empathy when we really can take in another person and feel as if we are almost standing in another person's experience. There's a beauty to that. The codependent piece is when we can't actually tell if the energy that we're embodying is somebody else or ours. We actually can no longer tell. Somebody else's anxiety can enter our system. But when we start to stay with ourselves while we're experiencing somebody else's energy, we can start to notice, okay, the anxious energy is now being mirrored by my nervous system, and I am also here. I know I am safe. So I can actually be with the energy that my nervous system is mirroring and also stay in relationship with myself. That, I would say, is probably, the biggest example of empathetic empathy, is when we actually can still find ourselves amongst any energy that is happening. Codependent empathy is there's a whole bunch of energy that our nervous system is absorbing and or mirroring, and then we actually get lost and we go away without choice. The powerful piece about empathetic empathy is we actually can choose to go, I'm going to go away. I'm going to embody this energy that's coming in and choose to fully have this experience. Codependent empathy also takes place in an anticipation. And what I mean by that is we anticipate somebody's going to get upset, right? Or we assume that somebody's going to get defensive if we say a certain thing. And so we preempt our codependent empathy, right? I'm going to have empathy, codependent empathy for this person, meaning I'm going to change the way I talk. I'm going to repress myself. I'm not going to say what I really think because I want to protect myself and preempt this person's intense reaction. Because if they have this intense reaction, I'm not going to be able to handle it in my body. So I'm going to preemptively be empathetic to what I'm codependently projecting into their world, and then so that I actually can keep the peace with them and not upset them and keep the peace within my body. And oftentimes if we experience somebody get passionate about a particular topic or they're righteous, they're not necessarily mad at us, but they get into a state, an intense state, we then start to have an intense feeling in our body, and in our codependent empathy, we go, this person's attacking me, right? Or I'm not safe. Because some essence of their energy is now entering into our body, and we are having a reaction to them as opposed to staying in our own body and having a reaction to now the alchemy of their energy and our energy and sitting with that. The codependent piece is you're making me feel this way because you're being so intense, right? As opposed to going, I feel this energy just enter my body. Now, what am I going to do with this energy? Am I going to protect? Am I going to defend? Am I going to disconnect? Am I going to set aside the feeling? Am I going to go to work and prove and please? Because there's something happening to me amongst your intensity, right? My body is having this codependent empathetic response to your intensity. Now, what do I do with this feeling? Another thing about empathetic empathy, which I think I've said this already, I'm sort of saying it another way, is that sometimes there's a beauty to choosing to lose ourselves into another person's world, to choose it, to surrender to another person's mind, mentality, reality, experience. The beauty is in choosing. Codependence is when we default to losing ourselves. We default to losing ourselves. We don't have agency or choice in the matter, and then we point to the other person as the reason why we're having the experience that we're having. We point to the other person as the reason why we're losing ourselves. And often in codependence, there begs this question like, well, isn't enmeshment love? Right? If I'm going to unenmesh, does that mean they're going to think I don't love them? If I unenmesh, have a separate preference or have a separate experience, or honor my own experience and truth amongst them having their experience and truth, if I don't enmesh, if I don't, lean into the gravitational pull of their reality and try to handle them, is something going to go wrong? So it's almost like codependent empathy is saying, I don't have the safety to let go of this. I don't have the safety to let go of the other person in the moment. Let them have their experience and let myself have an alternate experience or an alternate opinion. Because if I don't enmesh with them, which is also another way of saying codependent empathy, then something's going to go wrong. The relationship's going to disconnect. The other person's going to disconnect. Most importantly, in codependent empathy, you have disconnected from yourself. And so when we move through our conscious codependence recovery, disconnecting from ourself no longer becomes an option. It's actually our relationship with ourself becomes non-negotiable. Having empathetic empathy with ourself first becomes the first point of connection, becomes the first point of empathy, and from there, everything in our life sort of orients around that, as opposed to us orienting to everything else, right? Because your relationship with yourself is where it all begins. So thanks so much for listening to my thoughts, theories, and rants. Please feel free to book your Decode Your Codependent session with me. It's free. I have holiday discounts running right now. Free and monthly conscious codependence classes in a few weeks. Thank you again for including my work in your healing journey. Happy healing, and life is now.